My name is Rachel. Before I begin, I want to talk directly to you, the person watching this right now. Can I ask you something? Have you ever been in a moment where your world was falling apart, but the people you loved most acted like nothing was wrong? Have you ever looked around and realized that the ones who were supposed to care just didn't? If you're watching this from somewhere in the US, maybe Texas, California, Ohio, or even a small town that nobody ever hears about, I want you to tell me in the comments where you're from. And more than that, I want to know your story. Because I know I'm not alone. Have you ever had to fight a battle completely alone, while your family was off celebrating someone else? Maybe they were throwing a party. Maybe it was a wedding. Maybe it was something as simple as a birthday dinner you weren't invited to. Whatever it was, it hurt, didn't it? I'm asking because I've lived it too. I had to face something terrifying, something that could have ended my life. And I thought when I shared it, my family would drop everything to be by my side. But instead they smiled, made excuses, and booked flights for someone else's happiness. They chose to celebrate while I was fighting for my life. And today they've come back, begging. But the person they abandoned isn't the same woman anymore. Let me tell you what happened to me. Growing up, we weren't rich, but we had each other, and that always felt like enough. My parents, Linda and Mark, were the kind of couple everyone at church looked up to. My mom had this warm laugh that made people feel safe, and my dad, well, he was steady, quiet but dependable. Then there was my younger sister, Emily. Bright, beautiful, full of life. Wherever she walked, people turned to look. We were a tight unit, or so I thought. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday dinners. Those were sacred. We had a small house, but it was filled with noise and laughter. I remember thinking more than once that no matter what life threw at us, at least we'd always have family. I was the older one, so naturally I became the responsible one. I was the one who stayed up with Dad during his heart scare, the one who took the late shift to help pay off Mom's dental bill, the one who quietly canceled her weekend plans so Emily could borrow the car for a date night. Didn't bother me, not really. I loved them. That was just who I was, dependable, quiet, the one who handled things. Emily, on the other hand, was adored. When she walked into a room, my mom's eyes lit up in a way they never quite did for me. She was delicate, dramatic, and endlessly praised. "You only get one youth, sweetheart," Mom used to say while brushing Emily's hair. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I'd be in the kitchen finishing up dinner and I'd smile because, well, what else was I supposed to do? I wasn't jealous. I genuinely believed that everyone had a role to play. Emily's was to shine. Mine was to support. That belief stayed with me for years. Even as adults, the roles didn't change. Emily would call to talk about her latest trip, her engagement ring, the party she was planning, and I'd listen, encourage her, celebrate her. I never asked for much. I never needed the spotlight or praise. A phone call on my birthday, a thank you, now and then, those small things meant everything to me. And I thought foolishly that when I needed them, really needed them, they'd be there for me just like I'd always been for them. I was wrong. Because one day everything changed. And for the first time in my life, I had no choice but to ask for something. Something big. Something life-changing. And that's when I learned just how fragile love can be when it's not returned. It started with the kind of tiredness you can't quite explain. Not the usual "I've had a long day" kind of tired, but something deeper. I'd wake up exhausted, fall asleep in the middle of TV shows, and even walking up the stairs felt like a chore. At first, I told myself it was just stress. I was working overtime, barely eating right, barely sleeping. But when I started losing weight without trying and noticed bruises on my arms I couldn't remember getting, I knew it wasn't normal. I went in for some tests, expecting a vitamin deficiency or maybe something hormonal. The doctor ran a few blood panels, then called me back in a few days later. I sat in that cold little room, tapping my fingers on the chair's armrest, watching the clock tick. When he walked in with that look on his face, the kind where someone's trying too hard to stay calm, I felt my stomach twist. He sat across from me, cleared his throat, and said words I'll never forget. "You have early-stage lymphoma. We caught it soon, which is good. But you'll need treatment. Soon." At first I couldn't speak. It was like the world had gone silent. My ears rang. I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was kidding or that it was a mistake. But he didn't. I broke down right there. Tears poured down my face and I could barely form words. "Cancer? Me?" I had no history of it, no risk factors. I was just 34. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I took care of myself. How could this be happening? As soon as I got out of that appointment, I sat in my car for a long time trying to breathe. Then I did what anyone would do. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, cheerful and laughing. "Hey sweetie. You won't believe how beautiful Emily looks in her honeymoon dress. We just picked it up." I tried to steady my voice, but it cracked. "Mom, I need to tell you something. It's serious." There was a pause. "Oh no. What is it?" "I just left the doctor," I said. "They found cancer. Early-stage lymphoma. I'm scared." There was silence. I thought maybe the call had dropped. But then I heard her sigh, and what she said next, it still echoes in my ears. "Oh honey, please don't ruin the mood. We're planning her honeymoon. We've been looking forward to this for months." My mouth went dry. "Mom, did you hear what I just said?" "Yes," she said with a forced calm. "But right now isn't the best time, sweetie. We're in the bridal shop. Let's talk later, okay?" She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at the screen, waiting for her to call back. He didn't. An hour later, I got a text from Emily. Read. "Mom told me what's going on. Can't you wait a few weeks before you start treatment? This is supposed to be my happy time." I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't even cry. I felt numb. It was like I'd become an inconvenience. A shadow creeping into their sunshine. My body was failing, my life was unraveling, and they couldn't even give me a moment. That night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering how love could feel so cold. I'd been there through every scraped knee, every breakup, every family emergency. I'd given them my time, my energy, my heart. But when I needed them the most, they brushed me aside like background noise. Something inside me shifted. A crack formed where trust used to live. And through that crack, bitterness slowly started to pour in. The day of the surgery came quicker than I expected. I didn't tell many people, just a couple of friends from work who had their own lives to deal with. I had hoped, even prayed, that maybe at the last minute someone from my family would show up. Maybe Mom would realize what she'd said. Maybe Emily would send flowers. Maybe my dad, quiet but thoughtful, would call me and say, "I'll be there." But no one did. I checked into the hospital alone. The nurse at the reception was kind. She smiled at me and asked, "Do you have someone waiting with you?" I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "No. Just me today." She nodded politely, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. The pity. I hated that. The prep room was cold. The hospital gown scratched against my skin. Machines beeped softly in the background. A nurse gently held my hand as they rolled me into the surgery ward, her eyes soft with empathy. "You'll be all right," she whispered. I nodded even though I didn't believe it. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia kicked in was the ceiling lights passing above me, one by one like a tunnel with no end. I kept thinking, this is how it feels to be truly alone. Surrounded by people but still alone. The surgery lasted a few hours. It went well, technically. But when I woke up, groggy and disoriented, the first thing I saw was the clock. It was just past 4 p.m. And the first thing I felt was emptiness. No familiar voices. No footsteps in the hallway coming to see me. No laughter. No flowers on the windowsill. Just that sterile smell, the hum of the 4 machine, and a dull ache in my chest that had nothing to do with the surgery. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Just a notification from Instagram. I opened it and froze. There they were, my family smiling under the Bali sun. My mom in a sun hat holding a fruity drink. Emily in a white swimsuit, posing with her new husband on a hammock. Dad in the background lounging by the pool. Caption read, "Making memories that last a lifetime, 2 hearts, #BaliBliss, #JustMarried." I stared at that picture for a long time. Tears ran silently down my face. I didn't make a sound. I just let them fall one by one until they soaked the collar of my gown. I kept scrolling. More pictures. More smiling faces. Beach dinners. Spa days. Sunset walks. Not a single mention of me. Not a single, "We miss you." It was like I had disappeared from their world, and they didn't even notice. I was in a hospital bed with stitches in my body, fighting cancer, eating plain broth from a plastic cup, and they were sipping cocktails in paradise. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling again just like before. But this time the ceiling felt lower. Heavier. Like it was pressing down on me. How do you erase someone from your life so easily? I wondered. Was it that easy to forget me? Did all the times I showed up for them mean nothing? Was I always just background? I thought about the nights I stayed up with Emily during her breakups. The time I drove 6 hours just to bring my mom her favorite pie after surgery. The way I held this family together like glue. And now, when I was cracking into pieces, no one was there to keep me together. I wasn't just alone. I was abandoned. There's a difference between being alone and being left behind. And that was the night something deep inside me hardened. Not out of hate but out of survival. Because if the people you love can leave you in your darkest moment, then maybe they were never your people to begin with. Slowly, day by day, my body began to heal. The pain from the surgery dulled, and the endless fatigue that had held me captive started to lift. I wasn't fully well yet, but I was moving forward, inch by inch, breathing through the hard moments. Emotionally, something shifted too. The hurt from being left behind was still there, but I realized I couldn't keep waiting for my family to care. I had to care for myself. The sadness and betrayal made me feel hollow at first, but eventually that emptiness turned into something else. A shield. I grew quiet, detached. It was easier to protect my heart if I kept it closed. Without their calls or messages, I stopped looking for them. Instead, I started looking for opportunities to rebuild my life on my own terms. I had always loved writing and small projects, so I took a deep breath and started freelancing. At first, it was slow going. I worked from my tiny apartment, sometimes late into the night, typing out articles, editing documents, helping people with their businesses online. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The money started coming in little by little. I felt a flicker of pride. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something just for me. I didn't stop there. I used my savings and freelancing income to start a small business, an online store selling handmade crafts and personalized gifts. I poured my heart into it, teaching myself about marketing, customer service, and finance. Every order that came in was a small victory, proof that I could build something without anyone's help. Months passed. The business grew, and so did my confidence. I moved out of that cramped apartment into a cozy little house of my own. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine, a place I could call home without feeling like an outsider. By then, I had cut contact with my family completely. Their absence had once felt like a wound, but now it was a boundary I needed to keep my peace. I refused to be pulled back into their world where my pain was ignored and my worth forgotten. I focused on building a quiet, solid success, a life where I was the one in control. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving in my own way. There were moments when I wondered if they ever thought about me, if they missed me the way I missed them. But those thoughts came and went like clouds drifting past. I didn't need their approval or their presence to know I was enough. I had fought through the hardest storm alone, and I had come out stronger. Now I own my story, not as a victim but as a woman who refused to be erased. This was just the beginning. Years passed and life took unexpected turns for my family, the same family that had left me alone when I needed them most. Emily's perfect marriage began to crumble. The happy pictures she once posted, full of smiles and sunshine, faded into silence. Rumors spread quietly that she was divorcing. I didn't gloat or feel satisfaction. I just observed from a distance, knowing that life has a way of balancing itself out. But it wasn't just Emily who was falling apart. My parents too faced hard times they never imagined. Their savings, everything they had carefully put aside for retirement, vanished. Bad investments, failed businesses, or maybe just careless choices had drained their accounts. The house I once grew up in was gone, sold to cover debts. The roles reversed in a way I never thought possible. Emily had to move back home with them, back into the house I no longer called home. They were all struggling now, their confident smiles replaced with worry and fear. I kept to myself, continuing with my work and life, quietly watching from the safety of my own home. I wasn't angry anymore, I was just cautious. I knew what they had done to me, how easily they had discarded me like I was nothing. Could they really come back and expect me to welcome them with open arms? Then one evening, just as the sun was setting, I heard a knock on my gate. I opened the door and there they were, my mother, my father, and Emily standing together, looking small and broken. Their eyes didn't hold the usual pride or arrogance. Instead, there was something else, humility mixed with desperation. Mom's voice trembled as she spoke. "We made mistakes," she said softly. "Big mistakes. We lost our way and now we don't know where else to turn." Dad nodded, his face lined with worry and regret. "We need you, sweetheart. Please, can we come in?" I stood there quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of everything they'd done. The nights I spent alone, the calls they ignored, the surgery they dismissed. It all came rushing back. But I didn't show them my anger. Not yet. Instead, I looked into their eyes and saw what they had become. People who once had everything but now had almost nothing. People who finally understood what it meant to be vulnerable. I took a deep breath, feeling the power that had grown inside me over the years. I could turn them away. I could refuse to let them back into my life. But this was my moment. I smiled quietly, the same calm smile I had learned to wear through every storm. "Come in," I said simply. "Let's talk." They stood at my gate, worn down and broken. The people who once ruled my world with indifference. I could see the years had carved lines of regret and hardship into their faces. For a moment I hesitated. The hurt I'd carried for so long bubbled inside me, reminding me of the nights I lay in a cold hospital bed, alone and forgotten. But now I held the power, and this time I would decide what happened next. Without a word, I stepped aside and opened the gate wide. They looked at me, eyes wide with surprise, maybe even a hint of hope. After all the silence, the absence, the pain, I was finally letting them back in. But it wasn't forgiveness that led me to open that door. It was control. I was no longer the helpless girl they abandoned. I was the woman who had rebuilt her life from the ground up. Inside the house, the air felt warm, full of quiet strength. I led them into the living room, where soft sunlight spilled through the windows, lighting up the clean, neat space. I moved with calm efficiency, setting out plates, pouring water, bringing food to the table. It was simple: bread, soup, some fruit. But it was made with care, and I watched them eat hesitantly, as if afraid this kindness was a trick. Their eyes, once proud and dismissive, now held something different. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was shame. But it was also relief. For one night they would experience what I had been starved of for so long. A home that cared, a family that noticed. After dinner I showed them their rooms. I had prepared everything ahead of time. Fresh sheets on the beds, towels neatly folded, a quiet space where they could rest. They moved slowly, silently, settling into a place they never thought they would need again. As the night deepened, the house grew quiet. I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all those lonely nights in the hospital. The cold, the silence, the feeling that my family had erased me from their lives. I thought about the years I had spent rebuilding my strength and my future without them. And I thought about what would come next. When morning light peeked through the curtains, I was ready. I brought them breakfast: coffee, eggs, toast. They ate in silence, the weight of the unspoken hanging heavy in the air. After they finished, I called them into the living room, where a single envelope rested on the coffee table. I reached for it and handed it to my mother. Her hands trembled as she opened it, pulling out the papers inside. "It's an eviction notice," I said quietly, watching as disbelief and shock crossed their faces. "This house is no longer yours." I paused, letting the words sink in. "A few months ago I quietly bought this house back," I continued. "Every dollar I earned from my business, every late night and sacrifice, it all went toward owning what was mine. This home, these walls, the memories, they belong to me now." They looked at me as if they didn't recognize the woman standing before them. The girl they ignored and abandoned was gone. In her place was someone calm, steady, unbreakable. My father's voice cracked as he said, "Please. We made mistakes. We didn't understand what you were going through." My sister's eyes filled with tears. "We need you, please." But I shook my head gently. "I survived when you left me alone in that hospital bed. I fought through the darkest moments without your help. Now it's time for you to survive without me." There was no anger in my voice, no bitter laughter. Just a quiet strength, a steady calm that came from knowing my worth. They started to plead, promising to change, begging for forgiveness. But I had learned that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about protecting yourself from pain. "I won't ask you to leave right now," I said. "You can stay here for a few days while you figure things out. But after that, this house is my sanctuary. I won't let it become a place of hurt again." Their faces fell. I could see the fear of losing everything reflected in their eyes. For the first time, they understood what it felt like to be powerless. To have no one to turn to. To be the ones asking for help and finding the door closed. I watched them slowly realize that life doesn't always go as planned. That choices have consequences. And that sometimes, the people you rely on the most are the ones who will let you down. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. This house was a symbol of my victory. A quiet, powerful reminder that I could take back control of my life. As they settled in, I went to my room feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't need their approval or their love to feel whole. I had built myself from nothing and no one could take that away. The sweet silence of my home wrapped around me like a shield. I had faced the worst betrayal and survived. Now I was ready to live on my own terms, strong, proud, and unbreakable. They came begging, but I was no longer a victim. I was a woman who had found her strength in the storm, and I was just getting started. Have you ever been left behind like that? Ignored when you needed help the most, while the people who were supposed to love you the most chose someone else? I want you to think about that for a moment, because it's a feeling that cuts deeper than any wound, the pain of being forgotten by your own family when you're fighting your hardest battle. If you've ever been through something like this, please drop a comment below and tell me your story. I want to hear from you. Your pain, your strength, your survival, it matters. And I know I'm not alone in this. None of us are. And if you're watching me from Ohio, Texas, Florida, or anywhere else in the world, I see you. I feel you. No matter where you are, no matter what you've faced, you are not invisible. Your story matters just as much as anyone else's. Because sometimes family isn't just about the people who raised you. It's about the people who stayed. The ones who stood by you when everything else fell apart. Those are the people who truly matter. Remember that your worth isn't defined by those who turn away, but by the courage you show when you keep moving forward. Life can be unfair and people can hurt us deeply. But the strength to rise again, to build your own life, that's what defines us. So if you're feeling lost or alone today, know this. You are stronger than you think. And sometimes, the greatest family we find is the one we build for ourselves. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm honored to share it with you. And I can't wait to hear yours.